Probably thinks he planted that ridge, one of them said, and the other one laughed. Walt didn't turn around. He set his coffee cup down, no rattle, no scrape, just a clean placement, and looked at the window instead. Outside, the emergency management vehicles sat in Harlan's gravel lot, their yellow hazard lights still cycling in the gray morning. The topographic map the two men had spread across the counter was visible in the glass reflection. Walt could read it from where he sat. He'd been reading that particular ridgeline for 30 years. He picked up his fork, finished the last of his eggs. His left hand rested flat on the countertop, and to anyone watching, he was just an old man in a work shirt, eating breakfast alone, already forgotten, already irrelevant. Nobody was watching. That morning had started the way every morning started, 4:15. The old Silverado turning over in the dark, exhaust drifting pale against the tree line. Walt sat for a minute without moving, engine idling, heater just beginning to breathe warm air across the dash. The hayfield stretched out to his left, black under a sky that hadn't decided yet whether it was going to give any stars. Most mornings it didn't. He reached across to the glove box, opened it without looking. His hand found the photograph the way it always did, by feel, by the slight curl at the corner where the laminate had started to lift on one edge years ago, and he'd never gotten around to pressing it back down. He pulled it out and held it against the steering wheel at 10 o'clock. He didn't hold it up to the dome light, didn't need to. He knew what was in it. 4 men, flight suits, the rotors of a helicopter blurred soft behind them, the way rotors always looked in photographs, like they were already half gone, already becoming something else. The background told you nothing useful. A ridgeline, a sky the color of old pewter, somewhere that didn't have a name you'd find on any map sold in any store. He held the photograph for maybe 30 seconds, not long, just long enough. Then he set it face down on the passenger seat, smoothed the back of it once with his thumb, left his hand there for a moment on top of it, flat, the way his left hand always came to rest on flat surfaces without him deciding to put it there. Then he put the truck in gear. The drive into town took 11 minutes on the county road. He didn't turn on the radio. Harlan's diner sat on the main drag where it crossed the old mill road, wedged between a hardware store that was closed 3 days a week now, and a real estate office that had been trying to sell the same 2 listings since the previous spring. The parking lot was gravel. The sign buzzed in wet weather. The hours painted on the door said 5:30, but Patsy had the lights on and the coffee going by 5. Walt pulled in, parked in the same spot he always parked. End of the lot, backed in, facing the street. Force of habit so old it didn't feel like a habit anymore. It just felt like the right way to park. He came through the door at 5:22. Patsy was behind the counter with her back to him, pulling mugs down from the shelf, and she said, "Morning, Walt," without turning around because she'd heard the particular sound of his truck, the particular sound of his boots on the 2 wooden steps a long time ago. "Morning," he said. He took the 3rd stool from the left, same stool. The counter had 12 of them, and at this hour the other 11 were empty. His left hand settled on the laminate surface beside his coffee cup before Patsy had even set it down. She poured without asking. He wrapped both hands around the mug and looked out through the front windows at the street. That was the whole of it most days. The photograph in the truck, the drive, the stool, the coffee, the window. He didn't talk much at Harlan's. Patsy understood that. She'd understood it for going on 9 years, since the first morning he'd walked in, sat in that exact spot, and ordered 2 eggs and wheat toast and said nothing else for an hour. Some men needed words in the morning. Walt needed the quiet, and the window, and the coffee that was always too strong and never quite right and exactly what he wanted. Outside, the ridge caught the first pale light. Walt watched it, drank his coffee, didn't think about the photograph on the passenger seat, face down. He never let himself think about it until he was back in the truck. The bag was olive drab, the same shade as his shirt, and it had been repaired twice along the left strap with black electrical tape that had since gone gray. It sat on the stool beside him, the one closest to the wall, and he hadn't put it on the floor. He never put it on the floor. He pulled the topo map out the way you'd pull a letter you'd read 100 times. Careful, no drama about it. The laminate had gone soft at one corner where the folding crease had been worked too many times, and he ran his thumb along the edge, checking it. The same check, in the same order, as every other morning he'd done this. The laminate wasn't going anywhere. He checked it anyway. The map was old. Not antique store old. Used old. The kind of old that comes from being opened and refolded in the dark, in moving aircraft, in weather that had no business allowing maps to survive. The annotations were in pencil, then ink over the pencil where someone had decided a feature was permanent. Contour lines that the printed version had gotten wrong. He'd corrected them by hand, probably 30 years ago, maybe more. A few notations in a shorthand that wasn't any standard military abbreviation. His own system, developed over years of needing information fast and needing it to mean exactly one thing. He found the fold he wanted, flattened it with his palm, and looked at the ridgeline above the town for a moment. Then he refolded it. The furnace kicked on somewhere behind the kitchen wall. The whole building moved, just slightly. A low shudder through the frame, the kind of thing most people feel without registering. Walt's left hand was flat on the counter already, fingers spread. He felt the vibration travel from the floor, joists up through the counter base and into his palm. He tracked it. Old habit, not conscious anymore. His hand read the structure the way another man might read a face, picking out the frequency, the duration, the way it faded. The furnace was healthy. Nothing to note. His coffee cup had rattled just slightly on its saucer. He reached out and steadied it, then left his hand on the counter again. Outside the window, one of the county vehicles, the white command post trailer with the 2 whip antennas and the generator humming on its hitch, was getting an early start. A woman in a yellow reflective vest was writing something on a whiteboard mounted to the trailer's side. She wrote quickly, erased something, wrote it again. Across the gravel lot, another figure in a blue county jacket was talking into a handset, not looking happy about it. Walt watched them the way he watched everything, calmly, completely. He'd come down this morning the same as every morning. Hayfield edge, engine idling, first light not quite yet. He'd held the photograph the way he always held it, flat against the steering wheel, both hands not squeezing it, just holding it. Long enough, then face down on the passenger seat, then the drive. He didn't think about that now. That part of the morning was already put away. He retucked the topo map into his bag. The strap tape had peeled up at one corner and he pressed it back down without looking, fingers finding it on instinct. The diner was warm. Somebody in the far booth was eating eggs and talking on a phone about something involving gutters. The 2 county workers at the near end of the counter had their voices low now, leaning over their printed map with a radio between them that was giving them something they didn't like. Walt picked up his coffee. The ridge above town was fully lit now, amber and quiet. He drank. The bell above the door hit twice, once on the way in, once because whoever came through didn't hold it. Derek Paulson was mid-40s, pressed collar, the kind of man who kept a pen clipped to his lanyard even when he wasn't using it. He moved through the diner, like he'd already assessed it, and found it wanting. His eyes went to the landline on the wall behind the register, and he headed straight for it without asking. Marla, she'd been working this counter since before the current building existed, watched him pass without a word. She'd seen the type. Paulson made his call standing up, one hand braced on the wall, voice low and clipped. Dispatch confirmation, maybe. Accountability roster. Whatever it was efficient, and it was over in 90 seconds. He hung up and turned to go. Then he saw Walt. Not Walt exactly. He saw the window and the staging area outside it, and then Walt sitting 3 feet from that window with a map spread open on the counter. He stopped. "Sir." The word came out with a lid on it. Polite enough, but the kind of polite that means sit down and stay there. That staging area outside is a restricted incident zone. It's not a spectator situation. Walt hadn't looked up from the map. "Yep," he said. Paulson's pen hand came up a little. "I'm Derek Paulson, County Emergency Management. We've got active search and rescue operations running off that command post." He glanced at the map, then at Walt, and something shifted in his face. Not cruelty, just the quiet arithmetic of a man deciding he didn't have time for this. "I'm going to ask you to put that away. Last thing we need is civilian input muddying already complicated communications." Walt refolded the top edge of the map. His left hand stayed flat on the counter. "Wasn't offering input," Walt said. "Was going to offer a specific fix. With a paper map." "Yes, sir." Paulson almost smiled. "Not the warm kind." "Sir, I appreciate the look. I can see you've been watching us out there, And I understand it's hard not to be curious when there's activity, but we have trained personnel in satellite-sourced topographic data handling the navigation problem. We don't need a civilian walking in with a paper chart. Walt looked up then. Not fast. Just the way a man looks up when he's decided to let someone finish. The relay station on the eastern ridgeline, Walt said. The one that's not talking to your helicopter survivors right now. Something moved across Paulson's face. A flicker. Gone. That's an ongoing operational matter, he said. I know the ridgefold that's blocking your signal window. Walt's voice was level. No edge in it. No heat. I've been through that terrain. There's a heading and altitude threshold that'll bounce VHF off the granite face and reach the station. It's not in your current data. Paulson straightened. He pulled the clipboard from under his arm and held it in front of him. Not aggressive. Just something to do with his hands. The pen was still clipped to the lanyard. I don't know where you're getting that information, he said, and his voice had shifted slightly, the patience in it a little more deliberate now, the kind you apply like pressure. But I can tell you that introducing unverified local speculation into an active rescue operation creates liability. For you, and for us. He looked at the canvas bag on the stool beside Walt, then back at Walt. I'm going to ask you to finish your breakfast and let us do our jobs. Walt looked at him for a moment. Then he reached out and picked up his coffee cup with his right hand and set his left hand back down flat on the counter. Outside, the radio in the command post was still talking to nobody. Derek hadn't finished. That was the thing about men like Derek. They never finished. People like you, he said, and he had his clipboard raised now, angled toward Walt like it was evidence. Read these maps the way civilians read them. You see contour lines. You think you understand terrain. But there's a difference between reading a map and reading a situation, and that difference is training. Formal training. The kind that doesn't come from the door opened. Cold air came in first, then boots on the linoleum, then Danny Okafor. She was maybe 30, wearing a fleece with an emergency management patch on the chest, and a radio clipped to her shoulder that was doing the same restless, broken circuit chatter as the one outside. She came in fast, the way people come in when they need a landline or a cup of something hot and they've been outside for too many hours. Her eyes went to Derek automatically, then swept the counter. They stopped on the bag. Not on Walt. On the bag, it was a canvas carryall, olive drab, sitting on the stool beside him. Old enough that the stitching had faded from black to gray, and on the front, small, no bigger than a playing card, was a patch. Dark background, subdued colors, a winged sword with a crescent below it. The kind of patch that doesn't explain itself to people who don't already know what it means. Danny Okafor knew what it meant. She went very still. Derek was still talking. And that's not a criticism, it's just the operational reality. We have certified personnel handling the comms situation, and what we don't need is... Danny wasn't looking at Derek. She was looking at Walt now. Quietly. The way you look at something when you're trying to confirm what you think you're seeing, and you don't want to be wrong about it. Her eyes went from the patch to his face, to his left hand flat on the counter, to the canvas map sticking out from the bag's side pocket, and she pressed her lips together once. Walt hadn't moved. He'd been watching her since she walked in, not obviously. Just the way his eyes had completed their usual circuit when the door opened. Door, windows, faces, and then settled and stayed. Sir, Danny said. Derek turned, a little annoyed at the interruption. Sir, she said again, and she was talking to Walt, not Derek. Is that a 161st patch? Walt looked at the bag the way a man looks at something he forgot he left out. It is, he said. Danny exhaled through her nose. Slow, like she was working through a calculation. Derek looked between them. Danny, I was in the middle of... 1 second, she said without looking at him. She stepped closer to the counter. Her voice dropped, but it didn't go quiet. Not quite. You flew with them. 22 years, Walt said. Something happened to Danny Okafor's expression that she didn't quite manage to control. It wasn't awe, exactly. It was closer to the way someone looks when a door opens in a wall they'd assumed was solid. She looked at the map sticking out of the bag, then back at him. Would you excuse me for 1 minute, she said. It wasn't a question. She was already turning, already pulling the radio off her shoulder, already moving back toward the door with her thumb on the transmit key. Derek watched her go. "What's the... Danny, we're not..." The door swung shut behind her. Derek stood there, clipboard still raised, sentence unfinished. Walt picked up his coffee cup. Through the diner window, in the gray morning light, Danny Okafor could be seen stopped beside the command post vehicle, radio pressed to her ear, talking fast. Derek was still talking. That was the thing. He had his clipboard raised, finger pointed at the laminated map on the counter, and he was explaining, again, slower this time, like Walt hadn't understood the first pass, that topographic data in the field of emergency management required certified chain of custody documentation, and that well-meaning civilians with personal hobby maps created evidentiary complications that trained coordinators then had to spend hours unwinding. Walt sipped his coffee. Through the window, Danny Okafor was pacing a tight circle beside the command post vehicle, radio pressed flat to her ear. Her free hand had stopped moving entirely, which told Walt she'd gotten through to someone. "So I need you to understand this isn't personal," Derek was saying. "It's a liability framework. The county has protocols." The radio crackle came through the diner window, even over the furnace noise. Muffled, but there. Then the incident commander, a compact woman named Sergeant Major Prescott, 2 silver stars on her collar, who had not spoken a single word to Walt, walked out of the command post and stood beside Okafor. She took the radio. She listened for about 15 seconds without moving. Derek noticed her through the window and turned back to Walt with a look that said, "See, the professionals are handling it." Prescott lowered the radio. She looked at the diner, looked directly through the glass. Then she walked toward the door. Derek straightened up when she came in, started to speak. She walked past him like he wasn't there. She stopped in front of Walt. Her eyes went to the canvas bag on the stool, to the 161st patch, black background, the winged sword, the small tab underneath. Her jaw tightened slightly. "Sir," she said, "are you Walt Gideon?" Not a question, almost. "I am," Walt said. She unclipped the radio from her shoulder and pressed transmit. "Bravo 6, this is Prescott. I need you to read back that confirmation, all of it." A 2-second pause. Then a voice, flat and military clean, came out of the handset. Not loud, but the diner was quiet. "Confirmed. Gideon, Walter R., Chief Warrant Officer 4, retired. 160th SOAR, 22 years, over 3,000 flight hours, classified operations. Call sign..." A half-second gap, the kind that happens when the person reading is seeing a word they recognize. "Steel wings. Over." Sergeant Major Prescott held the radio at her side. Outside, in the gravel lot, every person in a uniform stopped. A tech with a headset half on, a corporal carrying a cable case, 2 deputies near the far vehicle. They all just stopped, heads turning, not toward the radio, toward the diner window. Nobody said anything. Derek Paulson's clipboard arm came down, slowly, like he'd forgotten it was up. Walt set his coffee cup on the counter. He looked out the window at the people standing still in the gravel lot, and there was nothing in his face that looked like satisfaction. He looked at them the way a man looks at weather, quietly, from a long way back. Prescott spoke again, measured. "Sir, I've been told you have a fix on the comms problem." "I think so," Walt said. "I'd like to hear it." Walt reached over and unfolded the topo map on the counter. His left hand came down flat against the laminated surface. The crease he smoothed was the same crease he'd smoothed 100 times. Derek Paulson stood 2 feet away with his clipboard at his thigh. He didn't say anything about liability frameworks. He didn't say anything about certified chain of custody documentation. He was looking at the man on the stool, and the map, and the patch on the canvas bag, and his mouth was closed. Walt's finger found the ridgeline. The incident commander, a compact woman named Reyes, bar on her collar, 2 days without sleep visible in the set of her jaw, stepped through the diner door and looked at Walt like she was making a decision she hadn't expected to make. "Sir." 1 word, no preamble. Walt had already pulled the topo map from the canvas bag. He unfolded it on the counter, smoothing it flat with his left palm, and the laminate crackled under his hand. It was old. The ink in the margin notes had faded to the color of old bruising. You could see where the folds had worn through the coating in 2 places, the paper beneath gone soft. Reyes came and stood beside him without being asked. Derek Paulson didn't move from where he was standing. His clipboard was still in his hand, lower now, hanging at his side. His eyes were on the map. "Your crew," Walt said. Not a question. "What elevation are they sitting at?" Reyes told him. Walt's finger was already there, resting on a contour line just south of a ridge that didn't have a printed name, just a penciled notation in his own handwriting, the letters small and precise. A compass bearing. A date, October 98. "They're in the fold," Walt said, "right here. The satellite relay sits north-northwest, but that ridge face, this one, runs granite, almost sheer, 40-degree cant. If your pilot transmits on VHF at the standard heading, the signal hits that face and dies." He moved his finger a fraction of an inch, but if he angles 14 degrees east and brings his altitude up to at least 2,200 feet before keying the handset, the signal skips, bounces off the upper granite shelf and clears the ridgeline, reaches the relay station. Reyes was quiet for a moment. "That's not in the terrain database." "No." Walt's voice was even. "It wouldn't be." She didn't ask why. She handed him the radio. Walt took it in his left hand. His palm settled flat against the side of the set, the way it always did, feeling. Old habit, older than this mountain, older than this diner. He pressed the push to talk. "Dawnbreaker 2, this is Steel Wings, you copy." Static. Long enough that the cook behind the counter stopped moving. Then a voice came back, young, tight with controlled fear, but steady. "Copy, go ahead, Steel Wings." Walt looked down at the map. He didn't need to. He had run this terrain at night, in weather, without GPS 26 years ago. He knew what the mountain sounded like through a fuselage floor. "Dawnbreaker 2, I need you to climb to 2,200 feet and come to a heading of 047. Maintain that altitude until you confirm ridge clearance. Then, key your handset on 127.5 and hold the transmission for 5 seconds before you speak. The signal will bounce. Give it room." "Copy, 047, 2200, 127.5. A pause. "That's going to put us close to the eastern wall." "I know where it puts you." Walt's voice didn't change. "I've flown that wall. You have 40 feet of clearance on your port side if you hold the heading. Do not drift left." Silence on the net. The parking lot outside had gone still. Through the window, Danny Okafor stood with 2 other uniforms watching. 20 seconds, 30. Then the radio broke open with a clean, clear burst of static, and through it came a voice, unbroken, loud, no fade. "Command Dawnbreaker 2. We have comms lock. Say again, comms lock. Relay is up." Reyes closed her eyes for 1 second. 1. Walt set the handset down on the counter beside the map. His left hand rested flat on the laminate, on top of the penciled date from 1998, and the mountain it named. The parking lot was quiet for a long time after that. Not silent. Radios crackled. Boots shifted on gravel. Someone called a bearing update over the net, and someone else acknowledged. But there was a quality to the noise that hadn't been there before. Purposeful, contained, moving toward something instead of circling it. Then Reyes's voice came through. Broken at first, 2 words and static, then a full transmission, steady and clear, and the coordinates she read aloud matched the extraction point to within 20 meters. Somebody outside said, "That's them," and it carried through the glass. Walt didn't move. His coffee had gone cold an hour ago. He didn't touch it. He sat with his left hand still flat on the laminated map and watched the incident commander relay the confirmation down the chain. And when the extraction helicopter's rotors came audible over the eastern ridge, a deep rhythmic thud that was unmistakable if you'd spent any part of your life listening for it, he let out a slow breath through his nose. Just that. Danny Okafor had been standing at the end of the counter for most of it. She'd watched him work the handset. She'd watched his mouth form the numbers and headings with a precision that had nothing to do with memory and everything to do with having lived inside that terrain in a way no chart could capture. She hadn't said a word during any of it. Now she stepped closer. Walt's shirt had shifted when he exhaled. The chain at his collar had caught the diner light. Just briefly, just enough, and Danny had seen it. She wasn't the kind of person who looked away from things she saw. "Those dog tags," she said, quiet. Not a question exactly. more like a door she was holding open. Walt looked at her, then down at the map. His thumb moved once across the laminate, across the crease that ran through a ridgeline he had crossed in the dark in another decade of his life. A crew chief, he said. 1999. He didn't say more than that for a moment. Outside, the helicopter sound was growing, settling into a hover pattern somewhere above the tree line. His name was Terrence Webb. Walt's voice didn't change register. It stayed flat, careful, the way a man speaks when he has said a name too many times in the dark and not enough times out loud. He was 26. He had a daughter he'd never met yet. She'd been born the month before. Danny didn't speak. "The mission doesn't have a file you can pull," Walt said. "It doesn't have a number you can look up. His family got a letter. They got a flag." He paused. "They got a cause of death that wasn't the cause of death." His left hand lifted from the map and came to rest at his chest, over the chain, without theater, without drama. Just a man checking that something was still where he'd put it. "Nobody was left who knew him," Walt said. "Not from that crew, not after." He stopped. "So I kept them." The helicopter crossed the ridge. The windows shook faintly with the downwash, and the light in the diner shifted for a moment as the shadow passed. Danny said nothing. There was nothing to say that would not have made it smaller. Walt folded the topo map along its original creases, slowly, the way you fold something you've folded 1,000 times. He tucked it into the canvas bag. He set 2 folded bills on the counter beside the cold coffee. Then he picked up the bag, nodded once to Danny. Not thanks, not farewell, something else. Something that passed between people who understand what it costs to carry a thing in silence, and walked out through the diner's front door into the noise of the gravel lot and the morning and the rotors coming in. He drove back the way he came. Same county road, same gravel shoulders, same ridge line sitting dark against the morning sky. He pulled off at the edge of the hayfield and cut the engine. The field was quiet. No wind. The grass stood still. He reached across to the passenger seat and picked up the photograph. He didn't hold it up, didn't angle it toward the light, just held it flat against the steering wheel the way he always did, his left hand resting on the dash, feeling nothing vibrate. 4 men, rotors blurred, a place with no public name. He stayed like that for a while. Then he set it face down on the seat. 3 of the 4 never came home. Walt flew the mission that recovered 2 of them. The 3rd man's dog tags were on the chain under his shirt right now, warm from his skin, going on 25 years. Nobody in that parking lot would ever find the name in any record. That was the point. Some things you don't carry because anyone asks you to. You carry them because someone has to. Walt started the truck, pulled back onto the road. The hayfield fell away behind him, still and green and quiet in the early light.